You ever been asked a simple question, and before you know it, you're 5 minutes deep into this huge backstory? You're not trying to be boring, I get it, but you just can't seem to hit the brakes. Well, let's get into it, because there's some really fascinating psychology behind why we feel this need to justify our every little move. So, yeah, what is that? Why do we do it? Is it just some weird personality quirk, or is there something a lot deeper going on under the surface? That's the big question we're going to unpack right now. And the answer, it might be a little more complex and maybe a little more personal than you think. And here's the core mind shift right away. We tell ourselves we're just being thorough, or trying to be polite. But what psychology tells us is that actually, it could be a trauma response or even a way we subconsciously test our own boundaries. It's a completely different way of looking at this whole habit. Which brings us to our first big idea. This isn't really a choice. It's a deeply ingrained habit. For a lot of us, that urge to over-explain is just automatic. It's a defense mechanism that kicks in before we even realize what's happening, and it's there to protect us from something we're afraid of. I mean, think about this classic scenario. Someone invites you out, and you just can't make it. But instead of a simple, oh, thanks, but I can't, you launch into this whole detailed story about your prior commitments, and your cat has a vet appointment, and you've been so tired lately. It sounds like politeness, but what it really is a subconscious attempt to soften a no that you feel you don't even have the right to give. And that leads us straight into what you could call the boundary trap. Because here's the crazy paradox. The very thing you're doing to try and protect a relationship is actually tearing down your own personal boundaries. It's this negative feedback loop in action. See if this sounds familiar. Step 1, you set a boundary. You say, I can't take on extra work. But then, step 2, you over-explain it, listing every single thing on your plate. By doing that, you're not stating a fact anymore. You're presenting a case, which means you've just invited a negotiation. You've given them a chance to poke holes in your reasons. And the result? Your boundary gets weaker. You've just signaled that it's up for debate. This quote just nails it. Every extra word you tack on to a simple no can act like a little chisel, just chipping away at that boundary. Real strength isn't in a long, complicated defense. It's in quiet, clear conviction. A simple, I'm not available for that, is actually way more powerful. All right, now for a really fascinating reason you might over-explain. And this one might actually feel kind of validating. It's not about being insecure. Sometimes it's a direct result of being a complex, fast thinker. It's the burden of a mind that just moves too fast for a normal conversation. If you're someone who thinks this way, your brain doesn't just see point A and point B. No, it instantly sees this whole web of connections between them. You see the history, the implications, all the potential ways it could be misunderstood. You see all the context. So you're not just trying to communicate one little idea, you're trying to communicate the entire ecosystem that idea lives inside. You feel like if you don't give them all that context, your point is just going to get lost or twisted. And you see all the nuance, the shades of gray, the exceptions, the counter-arguments. You're trying so hard to translate this complex, high-definition picture in your head into just a few simple words. And here's the punchline, right? The most frustrating part. After all that work to be perfectly crystal clear, your point gets simplified or ignored or completely misunderstood anyway. The very thing you were trying to prevent happens. And the long-term result of this cycle is just exhaustion. It becomes so draining to constantly try and fail to get your internal world across that you just give up. You learn to stay quiet, not because you're not confident, but because the energy it takes to properly explain yourself just feels like too much to ask. Okay, so let's trace this back even further. We've covered boundaries and intelligence, but often the deepest roots of over-explaining go all the way back to our childhoods. It's an echo from a time when we were just trying to be heard and understood. Psychology actually has a name for this. It's called justification fatigue, and it's a trauma response that can develop when you grow up in a home where your feelings, your perceptions, your truth were constantly questioned or dismissed. Because you weren't believed as a kid, your adult brain now overcompensates by building this massive wall of evidence for every single thing you say. And this fatigue is fueled by these really powerful drivers that got wired in when you were young. A deep fear of being rejected, a learned habit of putting harmony ahead of your own needs, the feeling that love and acceptance weren't free, you had to earn them, and maybe most importantly, this constant, draining need to prove that what you feel is real and valid. This all leads to a really powerful defense mechanism.
Instead of just saying, hey, that hurt my feelings, you intellectualize your pain. You build a logical case explaining why you're upset, justifying your emotional reaction like you're a lawyer in a courtroom. You're trying to prove your feelings are valid instead of just trusting that they are. Okay, so after digging into all the why, how do we actually change the pattern? This last part is all about reclaiming your voice. It's about making the shift from a life of constant justification to one of internal validation. This right here is the foundation. You have to internalize this belief. Your feelings are not up for debate. They don't need a PowerPoint presentation or a list of evidence. They are valid simply because you feel them. Period. Full stop. And here's the most practical tool you can start using right now. Burn this quote into your brain. Your no is a complete sentence. It doesn't need a part two. It doesn't need an appendix or a works cited page. It just stands on its own. Practice saying it. Feel the power in how simple it is. Ultimately, this all boils down to self-worth. You do not have to perform or explain or justify your existence in order to be worthy of respect. Your choices, your boundaries, your feelings, they're yours. They don't need a stamp of approval from anyone else. So I'll just leave you with this final thought. Take a second and really think about it. Who would you be if you could just let go of that constant need to explain yourself? How much energy would you get back? What could you do with all that newfound peace? Just think about that.